Hey everyone, it's Alex, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome back to my chronological recap of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're at part 21, talking about the film that leads directly into Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War, the biggest movie of last year. Well, Black Panther was the biggest film domestically, but this is a true event film, if there ever was one. I remember back in 2012 when the original Avengers was an event film, but this is a movie that Marvel has been working up to for 10 years. And the crazy thing about it is that this is only part one. Sort of. This movie does the impossible of bringing most of the established characters from the past films, putting them together in one movie, making their nemesis a character that they've been building up ever since the first Avengers, and it just does everything perfectly. So with a huge cast like this, it's really hard to pin down who's actually the main characters or supporting characters. So basically the main characters are the characters that actually get a lot of development. I'm not talking about Thanos, I'm talking about within the hero era. For me, I would classify the main characters of Infinity War as Tony Stark, Stephen Strange, Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, Gamora, Vision, Scarlet Witch, and Thor. And there's a lot going on with these characters, even if their screen time can be very limited because of how many characters are in this movie. Once again, Tony Stark retains his personality from Civil War, where he feels like taking responsibility is more important than being the comedian. Because ever since the first Avengers, he's been prepping for Thanos' arrival, because he was the one that sent Loki to New York City. That's what all those Iron Man suits were for in Iron Man 3, before he foolishly destroyed them all. That's what Ultron was supposed to be before Ultron became self-aware. So now we're at a point where Thanos is here, but the Avengers have broken up. Tony Stark is once again great. Peter Parker still does a really good job, even though he doesn't get a whole lot of character development like in the past, except he becomes an Avenger. But he's mainly there to build the dynamic between him and Tony Stark. Stephen Strange plays a big role in this movie, and I love how when he's introduced to Tony Stark, they're butting heads with each other, and Stephen Strange is willing to sacrifice anyone for the sake of keeping the Time Stone safe from Thanos, up until the point where the only way they were ever going to win is if he gives up the Time Stone. Bruce Banner has an interesting arc in this movie because in Thor Ragnarok, he was mostly the Hulk, and now he's back on Earth after one of the best openings to your villain ever. Basically, the movie picks up right after Thor Ragnarok, just as the Asgardians escape destruction, only for Thanos and the Black Order to slaughter half of the Asgardians, before taking the Tesseract from Loki, who stole it from Odin's treasure room right before Asgard blew up, and the Hulk comes in, fights Thanos, and Hulk's got the upper hand because he's the Hulk. He's the strongest Avenger at this point. And the moment that sets us up for how tough Thanos is when one of the children of Thanos, Black Dwarf, or Cull Obsidian, because I think he was renamed for this movie, although they never address any of the Black Order except Ebony Maw by their name. But anyway, Black Dwarf, or Cull Obsidian, whatever you want to call him, is about to help Thanos with the Hulk, but Ebony Maw stops him and says, "Let him have his fun." And then that's the point where Thanos beats him instantly without ever using the Power Stone. And throughout the entire movie, the Hulk refuses to come out because of his ass-whooping from Thanos. And that's really a great way to make your villain intimidating right off the bat, because the Hulk could take out anybody. So throughout that whole sequence, you're watching it going, all right, the Hulk is here, he's about to kick Thanos' ass, all's gonna be good. The Avengers are screwed. They're not going to win this at all. So it's interesting to see Bruce Banner and the Hulk have this thing between them where the Hulk just refuses to come out, really distinguishing the fact that these are two different characters in one body. Wanda and Vision's relationship is developed further, just as Wanda's starting to lose her Sokovian accent more and more. It was weird. But it's nice to see this relationship blossom even further at the point in the movie where Thanos has all the stones except the Mind Stone, and she has to destroy the Mind Stone, which is in Vision's head. And it's a very heartbreaking scene. There are lots of moments in this movie that are very, very tragic. And one of the other tragedies in this film involves Gamora, who gets a lot more development because she's the adoptive daughter of Thanos. And the scene where Thanos gets the Soul Stone is very heartbreaking because Gamora hates Thanos, and she discovered where the Soul Stone was. So when Thanos and Gamora arrive to Vormir, the Stonekeeper, aka the Red Skull from the first Avenger, informs them that the Soul Stone requires a sacrifice, and you gotta sacrifice something you love or cherish most. And Gamora's laughing because she thinks Thanos loves nothing, and that he got exactly what he deserved. And then Thanos starts shedding tears, and Gamora goes, "Tears? Really?" To which the Red Skull says, "They're not for him." And to that point, you know, oh, run, Gamora, run! But Thanos sacrifices Gamora, and it's tragic for him because she is the only thing in Thanos' life that he loves. But in his words, the hardest choices require the strongest wills, and he cannot ignore his destiny to pretty much save the universe by wiping out half of humanity. So if it requires the sacrifice of the one person that he loves, then so be it. Out of all the deaths in Infinity War, Gamora's is the one that actually shocked me the most, and it's going to make me the most curious on how they're going to do this. How is she going to come back? I'll talk about the deaths a little later on, but with everybody that got dusted post-snap, you know that they're coming back easily. But everyone that died beforehand, that's a little bit of a tricky subject, so I'm very curious to see how it's going to play out in Endgame. And speaking of deaths that happened before the snap, one of the other tragic moments in this film involves Loki's death, because, like I said, in Thor Ragnarok, the Asgardians just got away. Loki has just been redeemed, but as Loki once again tries to stab Thanos after tricking him to think that Loki would help Thanos on Earth, Thanos just chokes him out and crushes his neck with the Infinity Gauntlet. As Thor watches, he's tied up because of Ebony Maw, and just before Loki's death, Thanos had killed Heimdall, stabbed him through the heart as Thor was watching, so Thor really loses everything. And for being a guy who's been such a villain, Loki's death was heartbreaking because they just redeemed him in Thor Ragnarok. The two of them actually became brothers, and for Thor to lose his brother is just, man, Thor really goes through hell. But again, Thor manages to keep a positive outlook. He's not as comedic as he is in Thor Ragnarok, but he still keeps an optimistic outlook and is determined to kill Thanos. He even tells Rocket that, "I'm alive for a reason, and it's to kill Thanos." And when Rocket asks him, "What if you're wrong?" Thor just goes, "Well, if I'm wrong, what more could I lose?" So either way, Thor's ready to kill Thanos, but if Thor dies and can't win, then he's got nothing else to lose, so at least he'll go out fighting. Now, the rest of the characters are very much supporting characters, like Steve Rogers, Natasha Romanoff, Sam Wilson, James Rhodes, the rest of the Guardians of the Galaxy, T'Challa, Okoye, mainly because they don't do as much as all the other characters I talked about, but each of them still have their great moments, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about with Infinity War more than anything else, because again, I've talked about this movie countless times last year. The best thing I could do at this point, outside of talk about Thanos, is talk about my favorite moments. But let's actually talk about Thanos, first of all, because I'm still amazed that they kept building this character up with the first Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, Age of Ultron, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and he did not disappoint. He lived up to being Marvel's best villain. And the reason I think he's better than Killmonger is because Killmonger wanted to commit genocide out of pure anger, really. Thanos has a legit reason on why he's committing genocide. He wants to wipe out half the universe, but he has no specific targets. It would just be a random assortment of people, whether you're young, old, rich, or poor. You have a 50% chance of either living or dying, but it's for the greater good of humanity, because his planet Titan was overcrowded and his race almost faced extinction, and when he offered that solution, they did not do it, and thus Titan became a deserted wasteland. But when he did it on Gamora's home planet, it actually worked out. So his logic is, if I do this for the rest of the galaxy or the universe, then I'm saving it. I'm going to be their savior. And that's one of the reasons why I considered Alexander Pierce and Ultron prototypes to what Thanos would eventually become. Because like I said, the way Alexander Pierce and Winter Soldier presents Project Insight is that they can stop terrorist acts before they even happen. But really, he just wants to make sure that nobody gets in Hydra's way. And for Ultron, his idea of saving the world is to pretty much wipe out humanity because they can't evolve. which, I mean, he gets it from Tony Stark, who, at least Tony Stark has good intentions. Ultron is just crazy nuts. Thanos' methods are actually proven, and it's really hard to argue with it, because while it's still genocide in the end, and I'm not going to root for Thanos, you can kind of see why he makes these valid arguments, and it makes for the most interesting and complex villain the Marvel Cinematic Universe has to offer, and I can't wait to see what they do with him in Avengers Endgame. Now let's talk about my favorite moments throughout the movie, because there's so goddamn many. Like I mentioned, the Hulk-Thanos fight is a fantastic moment. When Tony Stark suits up in his nanotech armor, that's a big highlight, and personally, I'm more of a fan of Tony Stark's armor when it's put on piece by piece, but with the nanotech, he's just able to do all of these cool things, like arm cannon. He's able to form things with his hands, his feet, and it's just awesome. The return of Steve Rogers as he saves Wanda and Vision from the children of Thanos is a fantastic moment. And at this point, Steve Rogers is still a fugitive because of the Accords. So when he pops up in Avengers facility and goes up to Secretary Ross and goes, "I'm not looking for forgiveness, and I'm way beyond asking permission. Earth just lost your best defender, so we're here to fight. If you stand in our way, we'll fight you too." So I love how Steve Rogers is at this point where he does not care about the Accords at all. He's not letting any government officials stand in the Avengers' way. And he still has respect for Tony after what happened in Civil War. Gamora's sacrifice is a great moment as well. The entire Battle of Wakanda and Titan are fantastic as well. Probably my favorite action scenes in the entire series. And of course, I can't talk about the Battle of Titan without talking about that infamous moment with Peter Quill. Now, yeah, he screwed up everything. They had that chance to get the gauntlet from Thanos, but he messed it up. But I have a defense for him. He was just told that his girlfriend got killed for the sake of Thanos getting the Soul Stone and accomplishing his mission. And what's more heartbreaking is that Nebula breaks it down to him, and both of them are going through tragedy because Nebula just lost her sister that she just made amends with in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and Peter Quill lost his girlfriend. So at that point, his emotions just take over. And Peter Quill's been known to be an emotional guy. What was the first thing he did once he found out that Ego put a tumor in his mother's head? He snapped and attacked Ego. So it makes perfect sense for him to attack Thanos, and I love how Tony Stark is the one who's trying to calm him down because he's been in that spot before. He let his emotions take over when he found out that Bucky killed his parents. So he knows what Peter Quill's going through. And plus, Stephen Strange did use the Time Stone to see alternate possibilities of the Battle of Titan, and he mentioned there's only one outcome in which they win. So that means out of the thousands and millions of other outcomes that he witnessed, there is not one where Peter Quill doesn't snap and they win. So I think it was all part of the plan that he had to snap. And then the scene where Thanos grabs one of Titan's moons and throws it at Tony Stark, that's a moment that's so much like a comic book, so outlandish that it could almost be ridiculous, but they sell it. There are so many moments in this movie that could be ridiculous, but because you are so invested in these characters and this world, you take it seriously. Even the point when Steve Rogers meets Groot for the first time, Groot goes, "I am Groot," and Steve Rogers responds with, "I am Steve Rogers." You buy it. It should be weird, but you actually buy it. The one-on-one fight between Thanos and Stephen Strange is awesome. The one-on-one fight between him and Tony is awesome. Thor, Groot, and Rocket's arrival to Wakanda with Stormbreaker is just so awesome and really continues to show how tough Thor is and that he might be in contention for the strongest Avenger. And of course, I have to talk about the ending. The end of the film is where Thanos gets all 6 Infinity Stones after he uses the Time Stone to restore Vision and the Mind Stone. And then Thor throws Stormbreaker into Thanos, hits his chest, and Thor walks up to him and goes, "I told you, you die for that," because he's avenging the death of Heimdall and Loki. He pushes Stormbreaker into Thanos, so the axe is in deep, but Thanos manages to hold his own and go, "You should have gone for the head." He snapped his fingers. Thanos uses the Space Stone to disappear, apparently unwounded, which we'll see what happens. And then people start dying. Bucky is the first one to go as he disappears right in front of Steve Rogers. We see several Wakandans die out in the plains as Ubaku watches. King T'Challa dies right in front of Okoye. And being that it was her duty to protect the king, she failed pretty much. Groot disappears right in front of Rocket as he utters, "I am Groot," which according to James Gunn translates to "Dad," which, god damn it. Wanda disappears as she's over Vision's dead corpse, and it's almost like she accepts her fate. Sam Wilson dies as James Rhodes is looking for him. Then we cut back to Titan, where Mantis realizes that something happened. She disappears in front of Quill. Drax disappears in front of Quill. Quill realizes that he's the only Guardian left. He disappears. Stephen Strange looks at Tony Stark after he pretty much sacrificed the Time Stone to Thanos and goes, "There was no other way." Then he disappears, and then the most heartbreaking moment, the one that even thinking about it, is tough. Peter Parker goes, "Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good." And it's just dragged out for so long. You see Peter Parker holding Tony Stark, scared for his life because he's still a teenager, he's still a kid. And then he just says, "I'm sorry," as he dusts away. And it's even more heartbreaking when you go back to that line in Spider-Man Homecoming where if Peter died, then that's on Tony's conscience. So it's just Tony and Nebula on Titan. As he's mourning, Nebula's mourning as well and goes, "He did it." And then we cut back to Wakanda where Steve, Natasha, Bruce, Thor, James Rhodes, and Rocket are still there. And then Thanos goes to a distant planet where he's on a farm and watches the sunset on a grateful universe. And then it cuts to credits. And unlike the stylistic credits that so many of the movies have used, it's just black with white text and a very powerful score by Alan Silvestri. Again, one of my top 3 favorite MCU scores. And the ending is pretty ballsy because while it's part 1 for our heroes, it's pretty much the end for Thanos. He had a beginning, middle, and end, and he accomplished his goal. So it's that moment alone, and the fact that this movie made me just feel so many emotions, whether it was hell yeah or tearing up. Again, this is cliche to me, considering how many MCU movies I've given this rating to, but get off your ass and go see it right now. It is a true accomplishment, and it's not even the end of the story, so yeah, there's a reason why this was my favorite movie of last year. The Stan Lee cameo here comes in pretty early, where he's a bus driver driving Peter and all of his friends to a field trip, and there's a huge ship right outside the window as Peter Parker tries to get out, put on a Spider-Man suit, and go help. And all the other high school kids, including Ned, look out the window in shock or wonder, and Stan Lee just goes, "What's the matter with you kids? You never seen a spaceship before?" It's funny, especially considering that he's a Watcher informant, so a spaceship is nothing new to him. Now as for the stinger, there's only one stinger at the end of the film, which I want to say right now. The first Avengers had 2 stingers. Age of Ultron had a mid-credit stinger, but no end stinger. This one has an end credit stinger only. I want Endgame to have no stinger whatsoever. I want it to end without having to set anything up. But anyway, the end credit stinger here cuts to Nick Fury and Maria Hill, who we haven't seen since Age of Ultron, as they realize something's wrong. Fury tells Maria Hill to call Control and initiate Code Red, but just before that happens, Maria Hill disappears, and Fury knows this is something that the Avengers are incapable of handling because they lost, and this is a true emergency. So he goes to the back of his car, pulls out that pager that Carol gave to him those decades ago, contacts her as he just dusts away right before he gets the chance to say, "Motherfucker." Wait, I have to censor these words now? Oh, that's great. Just great. Thanks a lot, YouTube. But yeah, the pager drops to the floor as it's sending a signal, and then Carol Danvers' logo pops up. And for this movie having such a depressing ending for our heroes, this is that slight sliver of hope. And there you go, that's my review for Avengers Infinity War. Now, in the words of Dr. Stephen Strange, we're in the endgame now. The stage is set, half the universe has been snapped out of existence, the original 6 Avengers are alive, and are joined by Rocket, James Rhodes, and Nebula. Scott Lang is still somewhere in the quantum realm, Carol Danvers is on her way back to Earth, and Thanos is just relaxing on his farm. Words cannot describe how excited I am for this movie. I will have my review up for Avengers Endgame as soon as I see it, because man, I'm hyped. I'm beyond hyped. So now I want to hear what you guys think about Avengers Infinity War. Do you not like this movie? Do you like it? Has your opinion changed throughout the year it's been out? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.